big books.
I don't know, and the phone call tells me something. You don't get an answer, and you haven't got a call all day, something's going on. And now I'm concerned. I'm going to stay here because this is proper.
It's okay.
That's where the other half is, Doug. Did you catch any of that? Yeah, what? What year is this? 1928? Third edition. We go third edition or fourth edition?
It don't matter.
It don't matter to me.
We're on the fourth step.
That's deep. What happened there?
Different than all the others.
Yeah, normally I told you I'm at work, but we've been so slow. We'll take off.
Does it look like they're going to make it, or does it look bad?
It's hard to tell because this is only the second week, so it's just real hard to tell. You know, I've done this a lot of times, you know, opening up new restaurants, but I can't even. It's just hard to tell. Real hard to tell right now. It's too early.
I know we had a spaghetti place. I've been going for spaghetti for like the last year or so. I went there the other day. They're closed down. I go, oh man.
Yeah.
Now where am I going to get spaghetti every week?
Talking on the phone, or you just crazy? Talking on the phone, or you just crazy?
Just now?
Yeah.
I just said, please, deal with the guy.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just coming back in, and the waves of aftermath of my stuff. So okay, I belong here. Let me just say. Because I'm thinking.
Guilt remorse, just get the brain going.
I ain't got there yet. Slow, real slow, man. I gotta get slow. Too fast.
Order in the court.
Get the gavel out of his hand.
Counsel, how does your defendant plea?
Yes. Guilty by reason of insanity. I was crazy about that girl.
Is that alcoholic insanity or loony bin insanity?
Okay. Next. Actually, is there a difference?
Oh yeah. Loony bin insanity is like Jeffrey Dahmer. Alcoholic insanity is you and me. I don't know about you, but I ain't hacked nobody up and ate them lately, but...
They haven't put a helmet on me or anything to go in anywhere yet. You ever hear about that?
Hello everyone, welcome to the Bottom Line Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We ask that you silence your cell phones and pagers at this time, and please refrain from cussing. It says cursing. That must be a northern thing. I don't. When you share, could I please have 3 volunteers to clean up after the meeting? Thank you. In support of AA's singleness of purpose, attendance at closed meetings is limited to persons who have a desire to stop drinking. If you think you have a problem with alcohol, you're welcome to attend this meeting. We ask that when discussing our problems, we confine ourselves to those problems as they relate to alcoholism. Please join in a moment of silence followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm an alcoholic and a member of this group. My name's Doug. What's up? Is there anyone here for their first AA meeting ever? Or just so that we may welcome you, visiting from out of town, coming back, or visiting the Bottom Line Group for the first time? If so, which one? Yeah.
I'm Christy, I'm an alcoholic. Just coming back.
Hey, Christy.
Welcome.
Keep coming.
Okay, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Amen.
What do you know? It says to read a sequence from the big book, but what I'm going to do is, what I've been doing is just taking you to the areas that I know are, the details of what it says exactly to do and what you're expected to get from it. And there might be a little bit of it, in my opinion, but over the years, my opinion, has been formed by a lot of the guys that I've come across that I thought knew what they were talking about. You hear people say something that they don't know what they're talking about, and it's almost like a sixth sense. You'll know that somebody doesn't know what they're talking about. I didn't know that at first, I have to tell you. When I was early in sobriety, I used to think that, basically everybody in there knew what they were talking about except for me. Later did I find out that that wasn't the case. And also another thing that I didn't know, that there's only one book where the precise directions are. I used to think that 12 and 12 had the directions for the steps. It does not. And still, I run into people who... I almost had some woman start a fight with me in another group when I said, this book has no directions. I said, then show me what it says, where it says to do it. It's just not there. It gives vague descriptions. It says, now about the 7 deadly sins, and then it really doesn't tell you anything what to do about it. It doesn't say... You take this particular one, and this is what you're going to do to be free of it. This is what you're expected. It doesn't say anything like that. It just mentions them vaguely. It just basically says, watch out for those 7 deadly sins, and then on to the next thing. It doesn't really... But in here, they're telling us exactly what's wrong with us, and it says selfishness and self-centeredness. We're going to go back to the... Tonight we're doing the 4th step. Last week I did the list of resentments, but I never did explain how being free of resentments is one of the most important things in my life today. And there's something that I need to get out when I'm talking about the steps, and that is, and it really only came to me a few years ago, that there's a spiritual solution that we offer in here. I always thought that somehow we just do this inventory and, somehow it just magically goes away or something. I didn't know that there was the precise directions for how to apply the spiritual solution to be free of these things. And it actually says that in the 3rd step. And the 1st step, and the 2nd step, and the 3rd step, the men who took me through the steps never actually took me through the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd step. And when I asked them, I said, why didn't we go through 1, 2, and 3? Why did you just take me straight into 4? And they said, because you've already done 1, 2, and 3. And he said, one of the guys said, this is how it is, really. The 1st step is you admitted you were powerless. You wouldn't be in this AA meeting if you hadn't already admitted you were powerless over alcohol in your life. Nobody ends up in here on accident. I mean, that's all there is to it. Even if the judge ordered you in here, no one ends up in here on accident. The 2nd step is quite simple. Do you believe in God, yes or no? Do you believe in a power greater than yourself? And he said, well, obviously you do, because you came to me for help. You asked me for help. Now you're pretty much admitting that I know something that you don't know about this solution. And that the 3rd step was the actual act of asking for help, was you made the decision to do something about it. And it was really that simple. The 3rd step is what they call the jumping off point, the point in which you're going to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, but it is not the actual step in which you do it. The step in which you turn your will and your life over to the care of God is steps 4 through 12. You're making the decision in the 3rd step to do 4 through 12 is what you're doing. And I don't know, I probably had about 7 years of sobriety when I first heard somebody say that. And I remember being in a lot of meetings and hearing people say things like, somehow making a reference to, I'm not doing the 3rd step today. I wasn't turning my will and my life over to once you've done 4 through 12, you can forget about 3. All you need to do is concentrate now on the action steps, the steps that they, like in step 5 when it says into action, this is what you're going to do. It's real simple too, and within the 4th step we're going to find 2 of what we're going to call and what we find in here to be 2 of the 3 spiritual solutions to the cause and condition of why I drank, why I am an alcoholic. How to be free of the things that made me drink, because drinking is only a symptom of an underlying problem. And where we're going to find this is in step 3. We're just going to go to step 3 just for a second, so if anyone doesn't remember it, we'll... Step 3 begins right at the end of how it works on page 60. At the bottom of how... at the end of how it works, it says A, B, and C. C was that God could and would if He were sought. And then immediately after that it says, being convinced we were at step 3. Which is that we... Because this is really one of the few places where it actually tells you that you're... because in steps 1 and 2, you're just vaguely bouncing around in the pages before that, where it does say this is the first step in recovery, and more about alcoholism. It says we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost self. This is the first step in recovery, and it really is that simple. Why people would say things like, it's the only step you need to work 100%. I still don't get that to this day. I've yet to find anyone who can give me a good explanation for what that means. And I did hear somebody throw that under the bus once, and what he said was, oh, so if the first step's the only one I need to work 100%, then by the time I get to like the 7th or 8th step, I can be 20-30% of... If I just do the 8th step 20%, then I'll be all right, and get down to like step 12, and we'll be down to like 10 or 15%, maybe even 40%, who knows. No, he said, I suggest that you work all the steps as good as you can. To hell with that percentage stuff. I don't know where that comes from. I heard another person say, you know where that stuff comes from. That comes from people who don't know what they're talking about. So they just, it's just... I call it myself, I call it the Pollyanna Cracker syndrome. Because I did it myself. I did it for a couple of years. I came into AA. I wanted to look good. Hey, I've been in here for a couple of years. I still didn't know what the hell I was talking about. And I heard somebody say something like, 90 meetings in 90 days. And then I heard somebody else say, halt, hungry, angry. Don't get too hungry, don't get too angry, don't get too lonely. What a crock of poop, man. You can get as hungry as you can. You can get angry. Angry is one we want to stay on top of, because that's our number one offender. Lonely and tired, those will have nothing to do with... Here's what it says in here, and I'm going to find it one of these days so I can point it out to you guys. It says, any scheme designed in shielding the alcoholic from temptation is doomed to failure. That right there throws HALT right under the bus. HALT does not work. If it's trying to shield you from temptation, you got to be able to stay right there next to it and turn it down. You got to be able to be in the room with whatever it was, alcohol, heroin, crack, anything. What are these new ones that are out? There's little pills that they're OxyContin. I heard a couple of people say they're going nuts over that stuff. And you got to be able to stand right there in the room with it with no one else there and say, I don't want it. And that's where these steps take me to. It's where the steps take... The guys who taught me said the same thing. They said, look, I don't know what happened. All I can tell you is I am immune. I have been in several situations when any time I would have drank before that or whatever it was, and it just wasn't there anymore. That's all I can tell you. So I firmly believe that this works. And you have that hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, and any one of those other human solutions that people say in AA meetings, they don't work. And a long list of white chippers can attest to that. So, back to step 3 here. Being convinced we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. Remember, he's just saying we decided to do this. We didn't actually do it. Just what do we mean and just what do we do? The first requirement of this decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Now, he's going to go on to tell us this little story right there. We're going to jump over to the next page and see that the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. The reason I'm pointing this out, because there's the whole idea behind the 12 steps is that alcohol is not what's wrong with us. We're going to get down to what we believe is really what's wrong with us, and we're going to be free of that, and we will be free of the alcoholism. And the idea is that selfishness is what's wrong with all alcoholics, and the solution to this selfishness is basically we have a process of things we're going to do to be selfless. How am I going to think about other people and do things for other people? This is how I heard somebody put it once. He said, look, I have to be taught how to do this. I have been selfish and self-centered all my life. I can't just walk out there and go, all right, I'm going to head out the door and think about other people and do things for other people. For 26 years, all I did was think of myself. How the hell am I going to learn how to do that? This is going to help me to do this. This is what these steps are all about. They're going to help teach me how to think about other people. And the idea is that you have to be free of what we're going to be calling the 4 common manifestations of self. The 4 biggest selfish things about me. I'm going to learn how to find them and how to apply the solution to be free of them. And then I'm going to ask God, how do I do things for other people? Basically it says, pray for the knowledge of God's will. And the idea, I went around to some of the smartest guys, but before I knew what it was, I really didn't. It was a mystery to me too. I said, God's will, huh? What is this God's will thing? I got narrowed down. I've been narrowing it down and narrowing it down. I come down to this God's will thing, and I said, okay, that guy's pretty smart. I'm going to ask him what he thinks of it, because I didn't know what it was, And I had a couple of answers I didn't much care for because they left me still scratching my head. And I had a couple of people. Currently, my sponsor, the guy that I like to call my sponsor, I haven't seen him in a while, but I don't really need his help. I need my sponsee's help more than I need him. I heard what he said for years. I still hear his voice in my head saying, look, dummy, it's as simple as this. If you do good, you feel good, and if you do bad, you feel bad. And that's basically all we're talking about here. But, once again, I don't know how to do good things because I've been thinking about myself for so many years, and that's what we're going to get to here. But, the guy I asked said, look, what God's will is for each and every one of us is real simple. I was supposed to be somebody, and I was obviously not that person. Who could step back and say I was supposed to be the guy who stole my parents' car and didn't bring it back for a week? Or that I stole their TV while they were, or whatever it was. I crashed their car and then told them to up yours, when they asked me to help pay for it or something. Whatever it was. Anything that it was that I did when I was drinking that hurt those people in my life. How can I say that's how I was supposed to be that person? No, that was my own little tirade that I was going off on in my alcoholism. And I like to think of it this way. I was supposed to be, the perfect person. I was supposed to be the good son to my parents, the brother to my brother, the cousin to my cousins, the grandson to my grandparents that I should have been. They should have been proud of me. They should have been talking about me when I wasn't there, saying, boy, how about that grandson of ours? Huh? Instead they were going, here he comes again. Lock the door. Caller ID. No, it's him. Don't answer it, Wasn't supposed to turn out like that. But that's what God's will was. I was supposed to be I was supposed to grow up is what I was supposed to do. And that's what the whole shebang is all about here. Because just think about it. My first sponsor told me this. He said, look, you don't need to, it's not written in here that this is all about growing up, but all you need to do is use your brain for just a second and think about this. This is where I was getting to here right now. Let's go to the page 62 at the top here, and it says, selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Okay? This is on page 62, right after how it works. It's in the chapter how it works. First, they tell you on the other page that the first requirement of the third step is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And then the next thing it tells us of importance over here is selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. So I thought the root of my troubles was that I just couldn't drink like normal people, that I kept going to jail on the weekends. I went to jail like 6-8 weekends in a row and started thinking, what the hell is going on here? Something is going on. And I didn't know that the root of my troubles was that I was thinking of myself all the time. It took me a long time to figure that out. So, selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear. That's what we're going to get to in the fourth step here. Remember, I was talking about the resentment list last week, and something that I didn't go into was that it's written in here, is that we're supposed to, remember where it says that there's like 2 types of people that don't get sober. The people who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, and those who are mentally ill, or whatever. You remember what it says. Many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which rigorous. Well, the chances are. Here it is. men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. So you got the people who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, and those who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. I would have to say I fell in the category of constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself, because that's the only thing I can really share with you guys is my experience with the steps. I was not honest with the fact that I was powerless over alcohol, because I remember when I came in, I said, this was the thought in my head, hey, this idea you guys have here of complete abstinence, that's a great idea. But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the good old days, because that's where the step one comes in. I don't know about that 100% thing, but I can tell you my own experience with it was that I really wasn't looking to stop. I was just looking to moderate. And I had to become honest with myself on that fact that I was powerless over alcohol. And when we get to the fourth step, this thing we're talking about, this honesty, this constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself, I must be honest about this selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my troubles. That, to me, is one of the 3 or 4 reasons. I haven't really written them all down yet. One of the 3 or 4 reasons for the fourth step. One of them is we're going to gain this knowledge of how to do this inventory for the rest of our lives. This is something we have to stay on top of, because like I said, I have to be taught how to do things for other people. My instinct is self-preservation, and that's all there is to it. Take what I can get and don't think about other people. And how that works is it makes me feel like crap, and I don't even know it. For years, I came into AA and didn't understand why those promises were after the 9th step. In the 9th step, I make amends for the harms that I've done other people, and I begin to get those promises that self-seeking will slip away, fear of economic insecurity will... we will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. A lot of those promises, I didn't understand why they came in there. It was because I've cleared away the guilty and remorseful feeling that I had for hurting those people. I didn't understand that. That, when I thought only of myself, I felt like crap. I didn't know that. But I do today. That's the whole basis of these spiritual solutions, is to be free of the feeling. This is how my first sponsor put it. He said, why did you drink alcohol? And I thought it was a trick question or something, and I said, I gave him the truthful answer. I said, because it made me feel good. I liked the way it felt when I was drinking it or whatever it was, He said, exactly. That's exactly why you drank alcohol. Now you have to ask yourself this question. What was so bad with the way that you were feeling that you needed to turn to alcohol, knowing what it's been doing to you for years? This stuff's been beating you up for years, yet you still continue to say, there's something wrong with the way I feel, and that alcohol sure looks good. I'm going to drink some alcohol and feel better. I don't know how you guys were living, but alcohol didn't make me feel better. It was a lie that was going on in my head. That's what we were talking about a minute ago, this alcoholic insanity that we're talking about, and the sanity that's going to return in the 10th step. Because what is the 10th step? It's this point in which we're going to be doing this inventory today, tomorrow, the next day, to be free of this selfishness and these 4 common manifestations of self. So, selfishness and self-centeredness, we think, is the root of our troubles. Once again, that's a pretty serious statement right there. He's not saying that this is one of the possible roots of our troubles. This is it. Selfishness. So, back to where my first sponsor said to me, he said, what kind of human being exhibits selfish behavior and driven by 100 forms of fear? What kind of human being is selfish and self-centered and full of fear? The child. That's what. And what could you say? You could almost describe an adult as being someone who was selfless and had not no fear, but had fear in its rightful place. There's this level of fear that I'm supposed to have. I'm supposed to have a fear of getting fired. It keeps me from getting fired. I'm not supposed to have it dominating my life every day. I'm not supposed to walk around the job 6 hours out of the 8 thinking I'm going to get fired. I know he's going to fire me. I know it. And that night I got to have a drink because he's going to fire me. And it's the whole idea behind getting rid of these fears is that these are fears that don't really exist. They are fears that I have conjured up just because of the way that fear has always dominated me, because I never became an adult and learned how to deal with them. I never realized that these fears were based in self And how I'm free of self is by doing things for others. When I'm thinking about other people and doing things for other people, then I'm not full of this self-centered fear, thinking the boss is going to fire me. I'm going to lose. I'm going to get kicked out of my apartment, and they're going to repossess my truck. And I've painted this picture of this snowball, and the boss doesn't even know that I'm thinking these things. But this is the basis of all these fears. Let's take the girlfriend. She cheating on me, and she's going to leave me, and little do I know, all this stuff isn't happening. It's just all in my head, okay? But I got to have a drink because it's killing me. So, our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is the extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything else, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us, and God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entire. This is right after selfishness and self-centeredness in the third step here. All right, into the fourth step. Last week we were talking about resentments. Now, right here at the bottom of the resentment list, it says we went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty, and that's the directions for how big of a list to make, okay? Some of you weren't here last week.
What page you on, Doug?
In the fourth step on 65 at the bottom.
Okay.
The fourth step begins on 64 right in the middle there. And the fourth step is 7 pages long. I tell all my sponsees that. I say, look, there's 500 and something pages in this book. Forget about that. All you need to worry about is the next 7 pages. How difficult can it be to read 7 pages? The difficult part is my brain was incapable of comprehending what it was that I was reading. I read this 100 times and still didn't see. I probably still a lot of things in here I don't see. I hope, because I spent the rest of my life learning how to do this and how to perfect it, and other stuff that's in here. At the bottom of the example of the resentment list here. And remember that resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. And this is an anger list is what it really is. It's something that I'm mad at. Anything that I am mad about is keeping me from thinking and doing things for other people. And that's the whole idea here. So, an adult cares for other people, thinks about other people, and does things for other people in order to be free of this selfish fear, this self-centered thoughts and fear that dominate me and make me drink. So, the idea here is that I'm mad about something. This is a self-centered fear that I'm mad about. And when I'm consumed with this anger, I am not thinking and doing things for other people. And it is a perpetual selfishness thing. It's sort of like a wheel that just keeps turning. It just won't stop. You guys must know what I'm talking about. I heard people give an example and say, let's say the guy on a freeway cuts you off. And you spend the next 3 miles thinking of how you're going to get in front of him and slam on the brakes or cut him back off or ram right up the back of him and knock the bumper off the thing. Whatever it is. So that was 3 miles you were driving. You could have been thinking about what you could do for someone that you love or care about, or someone that's in your life, whoever it is. And let's call it 15 minutes. It's 15 minutes of wasted time that you could have been doing something constructive with. And that's the whole idea behind it, is that when you make this list, I have to be honest. I saw from my list of resentments that it was the biggest thing in my life. I was a very angry person, and I always thought anger was a masculine thing. I thought it was like a manly. He's mad all the time. He's a real guy's guy, And little did I know it was a child. I was like a little kid angry. Whenever I see somebody mad today, I see a whole different thing. The more anger I see in somebody's face and rage, the more fear I see. And it's the strangest thing. I've never seen that before. But look over here on the list here. Each one of them has these fear bracketed alongside of them. And that's on the next page here. When you turn to the next page, actually it's on the 67 at the bottom there. He says, notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. Now what we're saying here is, this is one of the hardest things for me, because I kept coming up to the people that the reason I'm bringing this up was because this was a hard one for me. I still carried anger well into my sober days, my sober years. I've been sober 15 years now. Next month will be like 15 years. And I carried anger right there with me. I wasn't really, and I kept asking, are you sure there's no justified anger? There's got to be. I mean, it's something that I can be mad about, and it would be like, oh, okay, well, you're mad about that? Well, I'd be mad too, Wrong. He's saying This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It is an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? On the next page, we're going to get into the fears list, but we're going to back up for just a minute, and we're going to see that this is not just a resentment list. All we're doing is writing down resentments. That's not what it is. We're going to apply this spiritual solution to be free of these things. And here's how it's going to work. We're going to start on page 66, about, I don't know, the first full paragraph coming down the page there. He says, "It is plain. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile." So what they're saying there is, when all that time that I spent while I was mad about something could have better been spent thinking about those people in my life, thinking about what God wanted me to do, how to do things for other people, what to do, the fact that I care about them for more than just what they can do for me, you know. But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. You see, that was a resentment list. I remember, I think it was in the seminar. I don't remember. Somebody somewhere along the line, they had resentment written on the chalkboard, and they had those slash marks going through it to break it into the syllables. And they were telling you that re means this, and zent means this, and ment means, and to have resent something, and the sent meant resentment. And they were breaking it all down and analyzing it. And all I could hear was this other guy who taught me how to understand this. He says, "Oh, you completely missed it. We're talking about anger. Whatever it is you're mad about, stop breaking the word down. Forget about that. Remember, Joe and Charlie even said, you know why Bill Wilson wrote all this? He was an educated man. He went to college and he wrote a lot. He wrote books and stuff, you know, and he didn't like to use words that made him look like he was stupid. He didn't use the same things over and over again. When you see the steps, when you see the four-step inventory, a fearless and moral inventory, the exact nature of our wrongs in 5, defects of character in 6, shortcomings in 7, and those are all the exact same thing. But they said, Joe and Charlie said, the reason it's something different in each one of them was because he thought it would make him look stupid if he wrote the same thing in every one. If he wrote, the common manifestations of self, and each one of those, which is what he writes in the 4th step here, he calls this moral inventory a search for the 4 common manifestations of self. If he had wrote that in each one, it might have looked too easy. It might have made him look stupid or something, so he used a lot of different words up there. So resentment, that's all that was the $2 word for what I was mad about. And back to reading here. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. They're fixing to tell us in the 4th step, not out in 8 or 9, in some of the other steps there. In the 4th step, we're fixing to be told how to apply the spiritual solution to be free of resentments. He's saying if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. We turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future, the resentment list. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. This is one thing that one of the guys who taught me how to do these steps said, was that anytime that the big book tells you that there's a problem, it's immediately followed by the solution to that problem. Anytime that you're looking in this book, like the simple thing of, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power greater than ourselves by which we could live. I believe that's in step 2. And it's almost like that throughout the entire book. Whenever you see him point out the problem, he immediately follows it by the solution. And that eluded me for years. I was always looking for some sort of secret secret area of the book or something that I was missing stuff, and meanwhile I was reading right over it and didn't understand what the hell it was I was reading. This was our course. So he's saying that this is how to be free of these resentments. And this is a very serious thing. For me it is, because I am completely honest with myself. Resentment is my number one offender. I don't know if other people feel that, but I know it was for me. And it still is today. Today, I am 15 years sober, and resentment is my number one offender. It will destroy me if I don't stay on top of it, because if I'm thinking about something I'm mad about, I'm definitely not thinking about coming to this meeting and teaching you guys the steps. I'm not thinking about my sponsees. I'm not thinking about my family or my employer or my co-workers or anybody that's in my life. I'm thinking I'm going to get even with that. Ooh, and 2 hours later, I'm still thinking about it if I don't get rid of it. So this is how I get rid of it. This was our course, how to be free of resentments. This is the spiritual solution. It's called forgiveness. This is the process of forgiveness. How to forgive somebody when you feel they've done something to you and they made you mad. Okay? This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. Now that's the key thing there. They, like ourselves. That's how somebody related that, was to go back into my own life and see when I was a spiritually sick person, when I was drinking up a storm and I was running through the lives of the people that were in my life and I didn't care about any of them. You know, I was the only one. I was out to get what I wanted in this world. And when I hurt those people, when I stole whatever it was, when I lied to them, when I cheated them out of whatever it was, those things that I did to hurt those people, I was not a spiritually fit person. Because would a spiritually fit person do something like that? I mean, who would say, what does God want me to do? I'm spiritually thinking, what does God want me to do? He doesn't want me to steal their car or their TV or their money or lie to them about all this stuff. He wants me to be a good person. I mean, it's real simple. I mean, I can't imagine anybody who would say that. So the people who made me mad, like ourselves, when I was in the past and I hurt all those people, I was sick. They, like ourselves, were sick too. We ask God to help. This is the 4-step prayer. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is the prayer. This is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And that prayer, I mean, the wording of it probably isn't all that important, but I feel that prayer in my life today. I actually feel this sense of, I look back on my life and I know that I was not a spiritually fit person. And I think, would someone have done something like they just did if they were thinking, you know, what does God want me to do in this situation? I can answer that question easily and say no. It's easier for me to forgive today than it was. I mean, it's not. I don't know if anybody will ever hone that science to a perfection, but it's a process of learning, and that is a pretty simple process right there. And one of the main things is I must learn that I am the one who's paying the price for my resentments. Sometimes I'm mad at somebody for 2 or 3 hours and they don't even know it. But I've been stumbling over stuff, not paying attention to what I'm doing, cutting people off on the freeway because it's like a mouse in one of them wheels rolling around in my head and going and going and going, and I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. So I'm the one who's paying the price for these resentments. I must apply this solution so that I can stay sober. To make a long story short, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit, the insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. So that's a pretty serious statement. If I'm mad about something and I don't do something about it, I'm shutting myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And back to the insanity thing, that's something I like to point out a lot too, because I think that one eluded me for years. I did not understand. Joe and Charlie used to burn this into our heads when I went to the seminar like 3 times, and they said, look, we're not talking about loony bin insanity here. If you're loony bin crazy, then you need to go see a loony bin crazy shrink. This is AA. We're talking about how I react to that first drink. When somebody says, here you go, Doug, have a drink. Now, do I react sanely and go, no, none for me. That stuff ran me through the ringer. I've had enough. Or do I go, well, you know, it's been 2 years. It's been 3 months, whatever it is. I think I can have one. I bet I will bet you I can have one. 3 days later, I'm off to the races again, and everything I built up for whatever is gone. I went through that for 2 years. My first sponsor used to say, all you guys are the same. Job, car, broad, drunk. Job, car. What the hell's going on with you guys? I don't get it. That was one of his famous AA. Everybody got an earful of that down to 12-step house. So, remember that the fourth step is where we find, first of all, we make this list of resentments, and then we start to apply this spiritual solution. And I had a sponsee ask me one time, he said, so how far back do I go in my life? And I said, well, what my sponsor had me do was make the resentment list, resentments that I was currently harboring. If there was a resentment that I had 10 years ago, but I still wasn't feeling it anymore, then what was the point in writing it down? The key to this is understanding that I'm still angry about something that happened 2 years ago, and I must be free of it because it's keeping me from receiving God's will, right? When I ask God what to do, it's blocked off because I'm still mad about something that happened 2 years ago. And if something 10 years ago that I'm really not too mad, I'm not even thinking about it anymore. I remember it, but I'm not mad about it anymore. Then why do I need to write it down and apply the solution if it's not there anymore? So the idea was that if I am currently harboring resentments, I must write them down in order to apply the solution to be free of them because they're blocking me from doing God's will. But he also said, if your list only has 2 or 3 things on it, maybe you need to go back and put some things down that you're not feeling just to get an understanding of it. Maybe there is such thing as a too short of a list, and there also, may be too big of a list. If you got 20, 30 pages, maybe it's a little too much. No one can actually say, but you use your judgment, Do you think you want to write a whole book about this thing, or do you think maybe 2 or 3, 4 or 5 pages is enough to get a pretty good understanding of how to apply this spiritual solution? Because that's the whole thing we're talking about here is being free of these common manifestations of self, because it puts us in a better place to do things for other people. And when I'm doing things for other people, I feel good about who I am. I feel that I'm a decent person. I feel when I'm sound asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, I feel that I'm a good man and I'm doing the right thing and I feel good about who I am. And when I get up in the morning, someone says, here you go, want a hit of this joint? I go, nah, that stuff put me through the ringer. But if I'm doing bad things and I'm not thinking about what I can do, and I'm basically subconsciously feeling about myself that I'm not a good person, that I'm just a piece of dirt. And I never actually remembered. All them years I was drinking, I never had the thought in my head, you're a real piece of dirt, you know that? But it was there. Trust me when I tell you, it was there. It was underneath, and that's what we're talking about. You got to get it's an inside job. It was in there. And that's back to what my current sponsor says. Look, it's this simple, dummy. If you do good, you feel good. If you do bad, you feel bad. And that's what we're talking about. And if I'm walking around angry all the time, thinking about myself and that's not good, right? I'm feeling bad about it. So that's why I'm going to apply this solution to be free of this, because I'm the one who's paying the price. Now, one of the honesty things was that fear is at the basis of all these resentments. And it's real easy to get an understanding of that. Just go back to the list and look at it. My own personal list, I can tell you that I had a resentment against the Broward Sheriff's Office. They were taking me to jail more times than I can remember. I was going to jail back when I was early in my drinking, and the guys would come in there and shake hands with all the deputies, and they'd go, "You back again?" And it's like, and they knew each other by a first name. They'd go, "You, Fred," and I'm like, man, that guy's been in here too much. Little did I know, 5 years later, I was on a first name basis with the booking deputies, and I was shaking hands with them when I came in. "Are you back again?" And I was like, oh my God, this is bad, But I had a resentment against the Broward Sheriff's Office, and I have to admit, it was because I was afraid of them. I was afraid they were going to take me to jail again. I was afraid this time it was going to be for something in a blackout, like killing or raping or murder or whatever it was. I was capable of doing all kinds of stupid shit when I was in blackouts. I don't know about you guys. I'd wake up in jail and go, uh-oh, what am I in here for now? How bad was it? I don't know about you guys, but there was more than once that happened to me. It scared the hell out of me too, and find out you just did something stupid like trespassing or something. So my resentment was based in fear. I was afraid of those things. Look here, it says, Mr. Brown The cause of the resentment toward Mr. Brown is that he pays attention to his wife, and that's a pretty simple one. He's afraid his wife's going to leave him for Mr. Brown. There's a fear there. He's resentful at his employer because he's unreasonable, unjust, overbearing, threatens to fire him for drinking and padding his expense account. Part of his life that it affects his self-esteem and his financial security, and it's based in fear. He's afraid he's going to get fired. He's afraid he's going to lose his income. It's real simple. When I'm mad about something, there's something I'm afraid of. Remember what I was just telling you. From that point on, when I learned that, and when I finally admitted to myself, I said, okay, I get it. Every time I'm mad about something, there's something that I'm afraid of, and there are no exceptions. It's always, it's for me to walk around showing fear would not have been a manly thing. It wouldn't have been something that I wanted people to see, and so I showed anger. I was mad about stuff. That's the way I look at it. And the more angry I am, the more anger I see in other people, the more fear I see. That's all there is to it. It doesn't matter if they're an alcoholic or not. It's a manifestation of fear. So, the very next list is our fears list, and that begins on page 68. It's a real simple list, too. It doesn't. This is probably the easiest of these 4 lists that we're going to be making. The resentment list we went over there on the other page there. This is the fears list. It says quite simply right there at the top, we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. Now, there is the same thing that we saw in the resentment list. It says we put them on paper. It doesn't say we thought about it in our head. It doesn't say, that you read somebody else's fears list. It says that you're going to list, we reviewed our fears. Now, remember when he says we, he's talking about the first 100 alcoholics. He's not talking about you and me. He's not talking about you and your sponsor or the group of people here. He's saying when they wrote this book, we, the first 100 alcoholics, this is how they recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. They reviewed their fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. See, I've had a couple of people over the years made me stop and wonder. They said, no, the fears list is the resentment list. And here's where it says, flat out, it says, we put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. Because there was a couple of times there I was scratching my head going, wait a minute. Now, I remember that all resentment's based in fears, but I don't think that the fears list is the resentment list. It's not. This is a whole other list, and I tell my sponsees it's really this simple. It really is. And all you're going to write down is you're afraid of getting fired, you're afraid you're going to get it, your wife's going to leave you, your kids, she's going to take the kids, you're afraid your house is going to get foreclosed, you're afraid your vehicle's going to get repossessed, you're afraid you're going to get cancer, you're afraid your parents are going to die, la-di-da-di-da. And the list goes on. All the fears that everyone has. And Dennis, my sponsor today, says, look, there are 2 basic fears that can pretty much cover the gambit, and we'll call them a fear of not getting what I want out of life and a fear of losing what I have. And you can probably lump everything into those 2 categories. And just write down, whatever fears it is. It doesn't really... The important thing is that I see the things that dominate me, the things that I am so afraid of. I'm afraid of getting cancer and dying. It's really in God's hands. All these fears that I have, there are certain things that I must do to keep from getting fired, like showing up on time. I mean, who doesn't know that? But in doing my job instead of standing around all day and hiding from the boss or whatever. And, there's certain things you got to do to keep your marriage together, like not sleeping with other women and not pounding on her when she, does something to make you mad. And it's real simple. So the idea is, once again, that these fears are keeping me from doing what God wanted me to do. Instead of thinking about other people and doing things for other people, I am consumed with these fears that I'm going to lose what I have, I'm not going to get what I want, and the list goes on. The rent, all of it. I'm going to lose my job, my wife, and everything it just dominates me. And by the end of the day, those fears have been rolling around in my head, and I got to have a drink, and that's all there is to it. Come 5:30, we called it beer 30, and we were off to the races. I'd probably be in the bar 11 o'clock at night on a weeknight. So he says we put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Now I tell my sponsees, don't answer those questions. Those are he's just basically explaining it to you. He's not saying answer this question in relation to these fears. All you're going to do is write the fears down so that you see what it is, okay? Now we're going to find out that there's a spiritual solution to fear. And that's probably the most important thing in my life today, and I would have to say in all alcoholics who are in recovery, the most important thing in our lives is to be free of this fear, because if resentment is the number one offender, but all resentment is based in fear, and the very next list is a fears list, then when you get to these other lists, the other two lists of the 4 and the 4th step are harms done others and harms done others sexually. Someone once said that when I harmed other people, I did it out of fear. Because if you look at it like this, if I was drinking and I did something to steal or lie or cheat or whatever it was fear that made me do that. In the sense of I would not have been drinking had I not been dominated by fear, so I would not have harmed them. So in other words, fear is what we're talking about here. It is the biggest enemy of all alcoholics. It's the core of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the solution to fear, when we're going to get down to the bottom of this page, is real simple. It's faith in God. And the whole idea behind this is that lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power greater than ourselves, which we could live. But how? And that's exactly what this book is about. It's going to teach us how to have faith in God. And this is how it's going to work right here. Okay? We'll go ahead and read what it says here. It says, we asked ourselves why. It's not very much. It's only 7 pages for the 7th step. I mean, how long would it take to read 7 pages? We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. We never apologize to any calamity with serenity. What does that mean? That means that your parents just died in a car crash and you don't go out and get drunk over it. That means that your best friend has just been diagnosed with terminal cancer and you don't go out and have a bender, okay? That means that your wife tells you she wants a divorce and she's taking the kids and you're moving into an apartment and she's getting a house and you don't go get sloshed, okay? That means that whatever happens in your life, you're going to have faith in God that He's going to take care of everything. As bad as it may be when it does happen, everything's going to be okay. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God, and instead we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. Now here is what I've got written down as the spiritual solution to fear. And once again, this is the most important thing that I have ever learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. In 15 years, I guess the first most important thing was that alcohol was not the problem. That it was a symptom of an underlying problem. And this is the most important thing. That would be like the second then, because this one is more important than that, even though that is earlier on in the 3rd step they teach us that. And it says here, this is how to have faith. Immediately after what we just read there. We let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. And here is the spiritual solution for fear. We asked Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be at once we commence to outgrow fear. And that is so simple that I had to complicate it and didn't understand it for years. This is how simple this works. The whole program of Alcoholics Anonymous is simple. The idea is that these fears that we're talking about are self-centered fears. They're me thinking about what I'm not going to get out of life or what I'm going to lose, and just add on to that list everything that you can think of. And the idea is that if I'm not thinking about myself, if I'm thinking about other people and doing things for other people, then I'm not consumed with my own little problems, okay? The idea is, it says, we ask God to remove our fear. God, please remove my fear that I can't pay my rent, I'm going to get fired, and my wife's going to leave me, they're going to repo the car. Please remove those fears, and what do you want me to do? Is to do things for other people. So if I'm thinking about someone else, if I'm doing something for someone else, and I have genuine concern for these people in my life, I'm not sitting around thinking what I'm not going to get out of life or what I'm going to lose. Someone once said the two do not occupy the same space in my brain. It's either one or the other. I'm either selfish and thinking of myself, or I'm selfless and thinking of other people. So I ask God to remove my fear, and I think and do things for other people, and at once I commence to outgrow fear. Is that not the most important statement that I could ever think of hearing in Alcoholics Anonymous? It is for me, I'll tell you that right now. I am an honest person about this honesty, about this selfishness and self-centeredness anyway. You know what they said? You know how to tell if somebody's honest? You ask him. If he says he's honest, he's lying. I thought that was pretty funny too. But anyway, that's the whole idea behind the spiritual solution to fear is faith in God. And how I have faith in God is by doing what it is I think He wants me to do, which is service to the people in my life. And at once I commence to outgrow fear. Look how it says outgrow fear. It doesn't say at once I commence to be free of fear. It says outgrow it, as if it was a childish thing anyway. Who was I to sit around and think about things that weren't even real? Remember, most of the fears that we're talking about are fears that I just dream up out of my head. They're not even real. I mean, all fears are there for a reason. Someone once said, look, you're up there walking on something real high. It's a healthy fear that you don't want to fall, okay? But it's not a healthy fear if it's got you up there clinging to it like a cat with claws and you're hanging on to it and you're afraid you're going to fall. You just keep in mind your next step. Make every step count. Do not stumble over anything when you're walking 40 feet in the air on something 8 inches wide, okay? Pay attention to what you're doing. Because I do that. I do that all the time. I walk around on tie beams at 30, 40 feet in the air and I'm thinking, I've been doing this for so long, it's just a matter of, the odds. What are the odds you're going to fall and it'll be the last time you... Because I've known a lot of guys that have fallen. I've known, actually, a guy in the AA here, I took him to work with me and he landed right next to me. I was like, oh my God, And they helicoptered him out of there. They took a helicopter to call the guy out of there. And I was thinking, what? How come he fell and I don't? Because the fear of falling... You don't want to be free of that fear. You want to have it in its rightful place. It's the same thing with all fears. I have a fear of getting fired at work, but it doesn't dominate. It doesn't take up my first 2 hours at work every morning, okay? It just keeps me coming to work on time and keeps me doing my job instead of hiding around the water keg or something, okay? There's the fear of let's say one of my fears was the Broward Sheriff's Office of going to jail. That's a healthy fear. But it doesn't dominate my life now. It doesn't take up 4 hours of every day thinking about, oh my God, I'm going to jail again tonight. Now, what blackout's it going to be this time? What am I going to do now? I don't know. I'll find out, I guess, when I wake up in jail at 3 o'clock in the morning or something. But the idea is that those fears are keeping me from thinking and doing what God wants me to do. And this is basically, you can apply this to the other problems that we're going to outline here in the 4th step. It says, for when harboring, this is back in the resentment list, for when harboring such feelings we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit, the insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again, and with us to drink is to die. Apply that to the fears. When harboring these fears, I shut myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit, the insanity of alcohol returns, and I drink again, and with us to drink is to die. And the solution to fears, once again, we have 3 spiritual solutions. One of them is forgiveness. When I'm angry at somebody, when I have a resentment, I must forgive them because it's keeping me from thinking and doing what God wants me. It's shutting me off from the sunlight of the Spirit. When I'm afraid of all these things, whether they do exist or not, when I'm afraid of them and they're taking up all the time in my head, they're shutting me off from the sunlight of the Spirit, keeping me from receiving God's will. Go out to step 11 just for a minute and look at it. When you get out to step 11, it says, first of all, that you're going to seek through prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with God. But it doesn't say, okay, now go figure out how to do it. It tells you exactly what to do. It says, pray only for the knowledge of God's will for you. Seeking through prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with God. To me, it's this simple. I direct my attention to God and I say, what do you want me to do? And I wait for the answer. But the idea is, I'm a selfish, self-centered person, and if I don't apply these spiritual solutions to those 4 common manifestations of self before in step 10 and then in the 11th step inventory, before I ask God for His direction, it's going to sound something like this. It's going to sound something like, get what you want out of life. Take it from everybody that's in your life. Just don't even care about them. You walk all over them like bodies in the field or something. And little did I know, that was my whole life was run like that. And I just didn't care about people. The only people, when I look back on it, the only people I cared about were the people who had something to offer me. Whether it was sleeping on the couch or bumming money or bailing me out or something, whatever it was, they would. And as soon as those people said, "No, we're not helping you anymore. We're not doing anything for you anymore," I never talked to them again. It might have been 2 or 3 years before I seen or heard from them again. That was the only reason. I never thought, well, let me go by and see what I can do for them. Just hang out, or devote some of my time to them and tell them how much I care about them. How many times have I actually told somebody that I cared about them? That narrows it down to about 3 people, But anyway, we still got 2 more lists. We'll get into them next week, and the lists are harms done others and harms done others sexually. And the idea is that I've been doing bad things for a long time, and I feel really crappy about who I am. And the reason for the 9th step is to be free of these 2. So our spiritual solutions are forgiveness for our resentments, because it's blocking me from the sunlight of the Spirit. Faith in God for my fears, to be free of my fears, because it's blocking me off from the sunlight of the Spirit. And to go all the way back out there to the 9th step now is to be free of my harms done others. This is where the names for the 8th step come from. When you read the 8th step, it's one sentence, and it says, we have a list. We made it when we took our inventory. It doesn't say you're going to sit down and make another list. It says you've already got it. All it's doing is explaining to you in a past tense something that you've already done. But it is vital that you understand that, so they put step 8 in there to tell you, you made this list of people that you'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them. So amends are our other solution. Forgiveness, faith in God, and amends are the key to the future for the alcoholic to stay off of the booze and the dope and whatever else, okay? Would someone like to volunteer to do our chips tonight?